Aloha, everyone. My name is Rob Hack. I'm from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, and we have the great pleasure and privilege to put on a series of webinars and perform one-on-one company mentoring regarding exporting. And we're able to do that through a generous grant we received from DBET, who in turn received a grant from SBA in Washington, D.C. So I'd like to thank both DBET and SBA for this opportunity. Our talk today, as you know, is on logistics, and that essentially is shipping and moving product from Hawaii to foreign markets. And just to be pedantic and clear about it, when we're talking about exporting, we're talking about sending it to a foreign country, our products and services, not to a neighbor island, not to the mainland, not even to Guam or the Northern Marianas, which are US territories, but we're talking about completely foreign countries. Like most of our Hawaii companies are very interested in Japan. The United States has a free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, and certainly Europe, South America, etc. But most of our companies in Hawaii tend to gravitate towards the Asian market, and we'll tend to discuss that today in this talk. But the lessons learned here today can be translated to other markets, whether it's Europe or Latin America or wherever you're particularly interested in. So I mentioned that we are the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, often called HPEC for short. We're a nonprofit in Honolulu. We're one of 61 district export councils in the United States, and a district export council is set up by the Department of Commerce, and our board members are all nominated by the Commerce Secretary. And on our board, we have people from all kinds of backgrounds, but one common denominator is that everybody has a long, extensive career in some topic in exporting. Our speaker today, who we'll get to in just a few minutes, is Brian Suzuki. He's previously on the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. And I bring this up because on our YouTube channel, our archive of these events, we have approaching 100 videos now, and I encourage you to go to YouTube and look for the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, and you'll be able to look at all of these videos at your leisure. With that, I'd like to introduce Jamie Lum. She's the International Program Manager at DBET, and she can explain the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program in more detail. Jamie.
Mahalo, Rob, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us on this for this session on logistics. Thank you also to Brian Suzuki for being a part of this today. I appreciate him. So I'm Jamie Lum. I'm with the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, and our department is the recipient, and we administer a grant, as Rob already mentioned, from the SBA for what is called the State Trade Expansion Program, or in Hawaii, we've branded it as HiSTEP, the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program. We do work with partner organizations such as HPEC, such as the Small Business Development Centers, the Women's Business Center, which in Hawaii is the MINC Center for Business and Leadership. We work with the Veterans Business Opportunity Center, our local SBA. We work with John Holman, who is with the US Department of Commerce. He's the director here for the Pacific Asia. So we have many different partners that we work with to put this program together. HiSTEP is an export development program. It's designed for companies that are new to export, that are just exploring it, or all the way to companies that are already exporting and looking to expand. And thank you, Rob, for putting up our website here, so you can actually see the three components that we have under HiSTEP, which is our export readiness program are Hawaii Pavilions and the company assistance. So what you're participating in today is part of our export readiness program. We engage HPEC to help us put together these very informative webinars on various export related topics, and also sessions that address specific markets. So, these are designed to help give companies information, especially for those that maybe know nothing about or very little about exporting. Rob is scrolling through the topics that we've covered so far and what's coming up. So we usually have one a month. And as Rob said, they are recorded, and they are on the HPEC website, as well as you can go back and view these on the DBED website as well. And I think they go back as far as maybe 2017 on various topics. So that's one component of the export readiness. The other part is where we work closely with our partners to help give some business consulting and export consulting help to companies that register for the HiSTEP program. So once a company registers, we assign them to one of our partner organizations for at least one one-on-one session. And so this will help companies in putting together an export strategy, or maybe they have one already and maybe need to fine tune it. If they have particular issues that their company is dealing with, export related, they can try to also, people like Rob are very helpful in trying to pinpoint certain other resources or particular suggest some solutions. So that's part of the export readiness. So another component we have are the Hawaii Pavilions. These are trade shows that DBED has selected for to organize, to put together an organized fashion where we take a group of companies and we exhibit together under the Hawaii banner. We also have a number of trade shows we're doing this year that we're working with the Department of Agriculture. So together we are attending, and trade shows are starting to open up. Actually, the trade shows in Japan the last 2 years, they've still been held, but companies, it had to be limited to companies that already had some agent or representative or importer in Japan. So we're hoping as things open up that the people here, the company personnel here in Hawaii will be able to go, and we do anticipate that. But these are the trade shows that we have on our calendar for 2020 that Rob is showing on the screen. And so we will recruit though for those about 6 months or so before. We'll send out a recruitment announcement, and it's open to any company that has a Hawaii-made product or service to be able to be part of the pavilion. The STEP funds are used to subsidize the majority of the cost, and companies pay a small participation fee, and as well as cover their own travel expenses, et cetera. But we find that this is a powerful way to help Hawaii companies participate in these large trade shows at a cost that would be lower, well below what they would spend if they went in on their own. So that's one of the main things. And then again, to be part of the Hawaii brand and to be with other Hawaii companies, and maybe even learn from each other. We find that happens a lot when these companies go to trade shows. They learn a lot from each other through their individual exporting experiences. And then the final piece is the company assistance. We currently have already completed it for this year, but basically what that is that companies can apply directly for funding to help support their export plans, activities that they have planned out for the year. It can be trade shows, and they don't have to be the trade shows that we have we've designated as Hawaii Pavilions. In fact, we encourage companies to find other trade shows outside of what DBED or Department of Ag is already doing. It can be used for to help with things like if you're interested in a gold key service, which is something that the U.S. Department of Commerce has to help companies provide services to them in the country that they're looking to export to. They can help set up meetings, et cetera, with potential partners, distributors, et cetera. It can be used for shipping sample products. If you have a buyer that doesn't want to put in a full order, might want just some samples. And then in the last 2 years, because of the limited travel and because of trade shows not being conducted in person, SBA is allowing a lot more of these funds to be used for things like e-commerce and digital marketing. So HiSTEP funds can also be used to support that. So this is just a quick overview. If you go to our website here that Rob has up, you can take a look at that and get more information. We typically, just to let you know, because our funding, we receive it basically on the same cycle as a federal fiscal year, which goes October through September. That's kind of the calendar of how we usually kick off the new year in October, November, when we find out we have funding, which we need to submit a new application for 2023. But we normally find out in September, and then we start doing a kickoff and we start preparing for the next year. So just so that you understand kind of what the cycle is. And if anybody is interested, you can go to the registration and submit a registration form. There's no cost, there's no obligation. We simply want to get some information about your company and to see where you're at in your sort of your export experience, and we'll go from there. So thank you for again for joining us this morning. Thank you for Rob, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks very much, Jen. HiSTEP program has been wonderful, and over the years we've interacted and mentored and educated hundreds of companies in Hawaii with these funds, and it's just been a fantastic program. So I mentioned earlier our archive of videos here, and if you go back in time through the years, looking at these, you will hear me and other people talking about logistics. And I bring this up because we have one of the top people in Hawaii as a speaker today is Brian Suzuki from Hawaii Air Cargo. But I like when Brian speaks at our events, because Brian is really a full service logistics provider. And if you were to go back and view some of my marketing videos here where I'm talking about packaging and these types of things, I think you'll find how all of this relates to logistics, and our Hawaii companies tend to think of the logistics and the shipping issue too late in the process, and they can wind up losing a lot of the margins on their international sales because they have not paid enough strict attention to the shipping. And that could mean that your product might need to be chilled. There's many different aspects of this, but I think that if you develop a relationship with a freight forwarder like Brian, you can get him to consult to you on what it is your product needs for shipping to these foreign markets. And with his experience on both sides of the equation, meaning in Hawaii and let's say in Japan, for example, he can save you a lot of money by pointing things out to you that you will have never even thought about. So with that, I'd like to reintroduce Brian Suzuki. He's the president of Hawaii Air Cargo, and I'm going to start his slideshow now. Brian, can you see that?
Yes,
Okay.
I can see it.
Please begin when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. Next slide. sorry about that. I'm not very good for technical things, so I have to have Rob, I guess, turn the page, so
Oh,
to
no,
speak. So if you
no
can go
problem.
ahead, next, I'll say next slide. Okay, these are some of the other things that we talk about, and I've had before with teaching methods of shipping. Some people want to take a tour of what we're talking about at the airport, at the harbors, and then we had breakout sessions in the past. Next slide. Okay, specifically today, I'm going to talk about the different methods of shipping. We had you can continue next. It'll start bringing in some things. But we had a speaker set up to speak about ocean freight, but looks like she had an emergency surgery today. And because of that, she couldn't make it. But then she was eager to talk about using Matson. She's I'm talking about family, and she is I guess, working with Matson, and she does the international side. So if you have any questions specifically about ocean freight, ask, uh, send me a message. You'll have my contact later, and then I can get Pam to get back to you regarding your ocean freight needs. Next slide. We have ocean. Next slide. And air is the next one. Go ahead. Okay. We have all kinds of methods, but when I say all kinds, we are limited to air or ocean. Okay. I won't explain all these additional things, but we will cover these things and what things that you should be asking of your freight forwarder or your shipping specialist. Next slide.
Right. One of the things I think a company who's new to exporting will hear the term freight forwarder or FF very often. They'll see that in their documentation, but perhaps they don't really know what is a freight forwarder. Can you explain just
Sure.
very briefly what that means?
Okay, a freight forwarder, actually, they do everything like if you're an ocean freight forwarder or an air freight forwarder. For instance, my company, we do everything that an airline requires, but we don't have our own planes. We use all the scheduled flights, as well as a surface forwarder, ocean freight forwarder. We use the steamship companies that are available. Many of the airlines and freight steamship companies, they don't want to do the detail. They don't want to do all the documentation that's required. They just want to have the shipment brought to them. For instance, a freight forwarder has to go through all kinds of stuff like security checks, background checks of the shipper, so that we don't have anyone putting something that you don't want on an aircraft. That means also dangerous goods. We have to check on that. Things that might, I guess, catch fire. We also have bomb threats that we have to always be aware of. So all of our employees on the air freight side, they have to be trained. Also, they have to be vetted. So all employees cannot, they have to be US citizens or naturalized or by birth. But it is something that you never think about, except that if you're on an airplane flying, you don't want anything bad happening. So we are one of the links that have to check all those things out. And we get tested. TSA tests us every so many months. They try to get something packaged into our system to get on the plane. And we have to be able to watch for that. So you can't just say, I'm from XYZ company like an IBM and I want to ship something. We have to go back to the home office and find out if you really are a employee of that company. So anyway, that's a freight forwarder does a lot of things that an airline will say, we don't have the time to do it, therefore go to a freight forwarder. And as a matter of fact, because of that, about 30 years ago, I formed the Air Freight Association of Hawaii, the Air Cargo Association of Hawaii. And we've been in existence since then. And we've done a lot of things to help the shipping public because when you have it by ocean freight, you have to have out of Hawaii, whether going domestically or international, you have to have full container loads. And unfortunately, we don't have a surface forwarder that will take less than a container and build a container because we don't have enough people shipping all the time. Therefore, it's minimal unless you have a company that ships a full 40-foot container in a refrigerator. And I'll tell you some stories later. But let's go on as far as answering Rob's question on what's a freight forwarder. You got that in a nutshell. Yes. Okay, again, methods of shipping. This is the air side now. We ship passenger flights. We have all cargo aircraft. You can use a freight forwarder, integrator of people like FedEx, UPS. The post office is another one, but next slide, you can see the breakdown. Now, these are air containers. You have all kinds of sizes. And the M1 that's showing there, or the P1P, it's quite large. And you see how these go on. Next slide, please. Most of the freight goes on the bellies of a passenger flight. And what we see a wide body, something that is like a 747, the Airbus, and all these other big 787s, things like that. They use a belly where they put their baggage as well as cargo. And we use that for a lot of flights. Unfortunately, during this COVID time, we just don't have that many wide body flights. For instance, to Japan, prior to back in 2019, before COVID, we had 21 daily flights to Japan, different airports, of course, 21 daily. Today we have 0 daily, and then but we have some carriers that are flying, but most of those carriers from Japan to Hawaii, or from well, not necessarily Korean Airlines hasn't started, but those that are coming from Asia are carrying mainly cargo because of the backlog on the West Coast ports. A lot more air cargo is coming in, so not much passenger, if at all, but mostly cargo. They're full of cargo. But going back now, they're going back empty. We don't have anything to send back. So next slide. Go ahead. These are the insides of a cargo aircraft only, no passengers. So it's got a lot of room, but we use Pacific Air Cargo daily for our consolidation coming in from the mainland to Hawaii. As far as going to Asia, we have to use people like FedEx's plane or UPS's flight, but they go back to the mainland and they go around to Anchorage and then on to Asia. And so it might not be right away. It might take 3 days to get to Asia by air. It's a lot faster than going by boat. And okay, next slide. Rob, next slide, please. Did I lose you? I'm not catching. Oh, we lost that slide. Looks like I lost you, Rob. Hi, Rob. I lost you and I'm missing the slideshow. Hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm sure Rob must be experiencing some connection problems. So if we can just give him a minute or so to get that resolved. So sorry. Oh, well, there he is. Sorry, Brian. Oh, there we
No,
go.
I can
Yeah.
hear you.
So yeah, we'll just let him get back up.
All right. So, interesting how I can talk to you, but I guess it must be on Rob's end because I'm missing my slideshow and as well as the vocal. He's in Kentucky, by the way, attending the conference there. It's amazing with Zoom. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Rob.
Okay. Rob, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear
Oh,
you.
you're back up.
Yep,
Okay.
please proceed.
All right, next slide. Okay, the integrated carriers are your FedEx and UPS. Next slide. I'm going to mention that the air freight is not regulated at all in the US. Therefore, you have to shop around. I wouldn't say buyer beware, but actually there are a lot of tricks in the trade, and I'll show you some of the tricks that some companies use. Because of deregulations, you might just hear, I tell you a story, somebody heard that, oh, Brian, I don't want to talk to you because I'm getting 50 cents a pound from here and there. And then they said, I said, there's nobody going to be able to sell you 50 cents a pound. It's too low, below my cost. What happened is that once I audited the bill, this lady was shipping, she only had 4 shipments in 1 month. And in that 4 shipments, had they used my company, which at that time was, I think, about $1.90 a pound versus what she said was 50 cents. I would have saved her $4,500 on the 4 shipments. And she said, how can that be? And I explained to her that some of the things, and I'll explain to you how that happens. Next slide. Okay. Shipments are direct. Coming in from jet carriers for different rates. And therefore, I'm saying it's directional. Okay, keep this slide on. I'll go back. Back. The slide. You gotta, okay, I'm missing that slide. Okay. And these are just basically some things that you must know. And don't forget, people charge, people meaning the air freight, they charge by actual weight or dimensional weight, whichever is greater. And then the density of cargo is a factor because how much. Okay, this is important for dimensional weight. Different people use different formulas. And for international, we use length times width times height per piece divided by 194. I'm sorry, the international is 166. And the answer, if that's more than your actual weight, we charge for that weight. Whereas people like FedEx and UPS, they don't use 166, they use 139. And I've had I've found the person that I was mentioning about paying a lot, even though they got a cheap price per pound, their cargo had to be, was, I would say, balloon freight, a lot of space it took up. And that company, it's a national company, was using 94. And domestically, we used 194, but this one was a domestic shipment and they used 94. So 94 goes in any kind of stuff, much more, or twice as much as 194. So the person was paying for more chargeable weight than my rate, and then because of that, she had a huge amount of price. And the price that she was given only included the air freight. It didn't include pickup, delivery, fuel surcharge, and as I mentioned today, fuel surcharge is really going crazy because of the oil changes, oil price. But fuel surcharge is huge. Next slide. I'm going to be going through this. Inco Terms is very important because of how you deal with your customer. For instance, a term might include buying the product and having it shipped all the way to the door of the customer. And that's a little bit high because the inland or to the foreign country, it's better for that company to use their own freight forward, own customs broker, and that customs broker's trucking company. But on the other hand, you have to make sure that when you do these contracts, for instance, if you take it, all the contract would say to the carrier, in other words, to the airline or freight forwarder, and then after that, the responsibility is with the buyer. Therefore, anything that happens en route goes to the buyer's responsibility. Any claims they have to file. On the other hand, if they have it all the way to the airport, then you as a shipper will be responsible to get it there intact in one piece and in good shape. So this is very important on your terms that you work the contract with the customer. Next slide.
Sorry, Brian, I'd like to interrupt and stay on this point for a second.
Oh, sure.
Many of our new exporters have not dealt with Inco terms.
Yes.
And what these mean. And they get updated every few years. There was
there was one 2020.
Yeah, there was an update in 2020. And I would strongly recommend that our new exporters look into this and research it. You can find at trade.gov and some other websites can explain the different Inco terms very clearly. But I think if you focus on XWorks, FOB, and CIF, those are the three that I see the most. Occasionally, a customer will ask you for a price for DDP, and that can be very complicated for you to figure out what are the customs going into Japan, for example. But anyway, you could be asked for that. But again, just understand XWorks is the easiest for you. DDP is the most complicated for you. And then all of these other ones are sort of a variation in between. And it really is a transference of risk and who's doing what along the way. But again, I highly recommend everybody spend a little time in learning about these Inco terms. Sorry, Brian.
No problem. I've never had DDP except for inbound shipments. I get a lot of requests to quote for customs clearance and delivery. And, so they give us all the particulars and we have to go back with our charge because they're going to charge the shipper where everything is paid for by the shipper's end. So, okay, next slide. Okay, there are so many charges that people will charge for. Shipper's export declaration, invoice, you have to have a packing list. This is to ease customs clearance. Pickup and delivery charges, look for that. There's some people that charge handling fees. Customs clearance fees, that's something else that would tack on, but that depends on the terms of your contract. Usually, if somebody's going to go and do their own clearance, your customer, that is, that's fine. Agriculture inspection fees, we'll do that. They may ask you that if you're shipping something that might get rejected, you may have to put in a guarantee that if you do, you'll resend another shipment, things like that. We were doing a lot of potted plants and cut flowers in the past. We haven't been doing that at all lately. Airport fees, some airport charge for different things. To give you an example, in I think it's Tokyo only, not Osaka or Nagoya, but if we ship the shipment of say 100 boxes, what we do is we shrink wrap the box on a pallet, and then we say it's one piece at said to contain 100 boxes, and we'll put that on the airway bill because the airport fees include per piece. So if the air bill calls for one piece, even though it's got 100 boxes, they'll charge you one fee, which is only $2. But if you have it separately at 100, they'll charge you $200 as a just to handle the boxes, and that's what some of those fees include. Of course, duty that usually goes to the buyer, and taxes as well. And don't forget, pounds versus kilo are very important. So be aware that when you talk to somebody, they're charging you per pound as opposed to per kilo. You might think it's per kilo, but then it might not be. So make sure you're aware of that. Next. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit. This flooding was a biggie, shipping to Asia and to, we're having some issues right now because of the collection. And we're shipping them to all around the United States, to pet shops in Asia, as well as to Europe, all these live tropical fish. Next slide. This story, a buyer from Japan came in and wanted to buy small, in Japan, for instance, they have a little altar that they put flowers in, and they keep up if it gets dry or dies off, they put new ones. So the buyer wanted to have 3 anthuriums, small, medium size, and then maybe 1 or 2 pieces of leaf for the anthuriums. So I took them over to the Big Island, which is at Greenpoint Nursery, and they liked the flowers, they liked it, and the price came out reasonable, and with the shipping, it was reasonable. Then finally, they went back, talked to the people, they come back, and they want 10,000 bouquets per week. And I'm going, 10,000, nobody could supply that. And I said, why do you folks want to order that much? He says, well, we're the 7-Eleven of Japan, and the 7-Eleven stores. So if we have 190 stores in Tokyo alone, we can't just separate it, so we got to give everybody. Well, that killed the whole deal since nobody could get that many bouquets ready at one time. Next slide. So there are interesting stories. Now, Jamie talked about going to these different shows. Now, this is the China Hotel and Food Expo in Beijing, China. As a matter of fact, for those of you, this is really important if you're interested in doing anything. And the slide above is the French Gourmet. They're shipping, or we were shipping for them to Asia in boxes with dry ice to bakeries and hotels. And the beauty of this whole thing is that they prepare the dough, they flash freeze it. The buyer, when he gets there, all they have to do is they can put it in the freezer until they need whatever boxes they want, and then take it out. And these are pastries like bear claws and all that kind of really nice stuff. And it tastes really good. They thaw it, then they bake it, and they go ahead and sell it as though they made it. But there's no waste. And because of that, the stories on that show, I end up working with DBET and Department of Ag, and they pay me to move all the products for the show. And what happened was we took all the frozen dough, it was frozen, and we had it in the exhibit hall in a freezer. Then Sunday, the day before the opening of the show, I took a hand truck and I was taking it to a adjoining hotel that they made an arrangement to bake their frozen dough. And so as I was leaving, trying to get across to the hotel, it was adjoining, but the security guard stopped me, brought an English speaking person and said, you can't take anything out of this place. This is a foreign trade zone. So anything that came in, or everything that came in has not cleared customs or ag, so you can't take anything out. And so that really like killed this whole thing. It was very dramatic. The vice president there and the lady is from Hong Kong. They wanted a translator, and uh, and they got her to meet at Beijing. So anyway, dejectedly, we went back to the U.S. Pavilion, which was the fourth floor of this huge convention hall, and dejectedly, walking back, what are we gonna do? Then I noticed there was a guy, a booth selling pizza ovens, and there, the flat ovens. And I stopped and I said, "Can that work?" And he says, "Yeah, we just need propane, and then which is easy to get, and we just need something to bake." I said, "I got something to bake," and so the vice president talked to them what kind of stuff they needed to do, and they got the other people got the propane. Next morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, we were there to set up. The show doesn't open till 9, and this aroma permeated the whole convention center of freshly baked pastries. And our nose took us back up to the fourth floor, and then went to the oven site, and the thing was working. They tried it out. The pastries was terrific. And when the show started, everyone was coming up to ask where the smell was coming from, the aroma. They had to write on the back of a cardboard box with marking pen, magic marker. For samples, they had an arrow, go to Hawaii booth. And the Hawaii booth was the one that you show on the bottom left. And that was for Hawaiian Candy's Nenu Mac label. And to end that story with that, we were the hit, meaning the Hawaii booth and the French Gourmet was a hit for the show. And the organizers came up to us and said, "Next year is in Shanghai. We want you there. You tell us where you want your booth. We give you anything you want," because that was the most popular thing. It was a 3-day affair. And this company was working in Honolulu, downtown Honolulu, the Fall Street Mall. They were in the basement of a building. It's the coolest place you could find. And right after that, they started to get orders. They hired that gal to become their rep in Hong Kong, and they decided to use Hong Kong as a distribution center. So they built a first-class bakery to do things, to make the dough, and right away from the making it, flash freezing it, putting right into the 40-foot massive containers, and took it out to Hong Kong. And so at any rate, they were so popular. 5 years after that, they moved to the mainland because the shipping costs from Los Angeles to Hong Kong was a lot less, several $1,000s less than from Honolulu to that area. So they moved away, and I lost my customer, but then they succeeded. So that was a great show, and it was lucky to happen like that. Next slide.
Brian, you mentioned to me recently that even though we had a pandemic last year, your shipments to Japan were a record for Hawaii Air Cargo. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, it's strange, I guess, because we ship Hawaii products, from jams and jellies, honey, coffee. We're shipping cookies, candy, of course, not as much as before, but the slide is of Hawaiian Wholesale, their booth, they were there. And the thing is that, I don't know what it was, they started to order, and we have like every 3 weeks, we'll have a big shipment. But now from April, actually we started 2 weeks ago, we started again, and this started last year. The biggest single product that we're shipping is Hawaiian sandals, slippers and sandals. And as fast as they can manufacture it, we're shipping. And we're shipping thousands of every week, thousands of slippers and sandals each week. And they come up to huge pallets, like 6 pallets of these things. And that, whoever they got, I don't know who the customer in Japan was, but or is. The thing is that they must be distributing the slippers and sandals throughout Japan, and people, because now starts the warmer month, they can't keep it in stock. So every week we're shipping slippers and sandals. So that was a biggest increase. But now we're also shipping a lot more cookies. We don't ship as much papayas and pineapple as we used to. The thing is, by the way, pineapple, for instance, they get their pineapples from Philippines, and there's a huge difference. We're shipping Maui pine, and the Maui pine was really sweet. So it was important for them to do a taste. In other words, you have to try to tell the buyer to make sure people taste it. Because once you taste it, it's not like a regular pineapple. And sure enough, we did a lot of that at some of the shows in Japan, have them taste it. My hotel room was always a place where we had to cut up all the pineapples and refrigerate them. Actually, I took it to the venue's refrigeration, but we're cutting up. Had to go to their 7-Eleven or their 99 cents, so 100 yen store, they call that, and buy knives and cutting boards. But things like that, we make do. That's why I say that if you have any product, you should go in advance to see one of those shows to see if you really can fit in. Next slide. Another thing is to have it in the language of where you're going to. If it's Japan, have it in Japanese. Today, the D-Band hires someone to provide a translator at the booth. So they have all that kind of stuff there. This is a story about that last one was a slide about plants. We had a bunch of Japanese men, about 4 of them came to Hawaii. This is in the year 2000. And you can put the next slide on. And these people went directly to, well, by the way, that's Neil Arkaki. And then those are the translators that are hired to, interpret for them at the show. I think this was at the China show. Okay, this slide, they came to the Department of Ag, the 4 people, they went there. And they were here on a golf outing with the travel agent. They were officers or owners of this park, the pineapple park in Okinawa. But it was just pineapples up to that time. And rows and rows, you drive through, you see one, you see them all. But they wanted to have plants that were part of the pineapple, or they call it ananas, a scientific name, family. And they heard that Hawaii had some. Just by chance, when they went to the Department of Ag, they couldn't speak English and nobody there could speak Japanese. So right away, I knew the people from all the experience of traveling, showing Hawaii potted plants and things like that. They called me up and I was there 20 minutes later and then found out that what they wanted to find these plants. So I said, just by chance, I know a personal friend of mine who's I guess the world's foremost hybridizers of these plants. So I took them the next day. We took a flight to Europe, went to the nursery, and right away they wanted like 5,000 plants. Now, to take plants to Japan had to be no roots, no soil, no bugs, of course. So there was a preparation time of taking the keikis, we call it the shoots that come down, because the shoots of these plants, you just stick them in the ground and roots come out and it'll take. So what happened was they still had to clean it, make sure no soil, and wrap it and put all the names on them. And they ended up, we only could ship 2,500 first time. And that took 3 months to get it prepared. But right away it took, and then they wanted another 5,000. And then I think, the next actually 3, 4, 5 years, we must have shipped upwards of 15,000 plants to Okinawa. And for these people, they did very well. For the park, they have these carts. You see the bottom slide is like a little pineapple on a golf cart. But then you take it through and then they look at the flowers and they became interested because now that place could sell these plants because they make keikis or shoots and then you can just do the same thing. And they have a gift shop at the end and then they can go ahead and the gift shop also outside of the gift shop is a post office. And this place is, the people that go there are usually Japanese tourists. And they have a lot of schools. School kids go on their school travel retreat and they would go to different parts of Japan as a class. They even come to Hawaii, some of the schools. They haven't done it since 2019, but I've talked to groups coming here from Japan, the students, but I talk about the history of the first generation coming to Hawaii. That's another side story, but At the same token, this place became so popular that this pineapple park became a big hit. And anyway, they really took off and they did very well. So it was just a matter of chance. And you can see the plants on the left-hand slide, very colorful. And they put up whole walls. And these plants, you just stick them on a wall and then it'll cling to the wall. So next slide is basically question time. It's already about 5 more minutes.
If anybody has a question, please type it in. Otherwise,
You can put the next slide on. Yeah. This is my contact on here. If you need to call me, my cell phone is best. I'm more on the senior citizen side, so luckily I have very good staff people, and you can ask the staff people on some of these things, questions you may have. But if you need to reach me, my cell phone is there, and that's the fastest way. If you need, don't leave a message at my office because I forget to pick up the messages. So if anything, you can ask somebody who's answering the phone to ask me to call back, and then they'll call me on my cell phone. But you're free to call me on my cell phone too, because there are a lot of other stories that I can pass on, and mail service is another thing too.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, there's a couple questions.
Yes.
They're difficult to answer, but at least you can give us some idea. So many small companies in Hawaii, when they're first exporting, let's say to Japan, they will use this service of USPS. It works for a certain amount of product, right? This
Yes.
large box is as big as they can do. For $110, you can fit in some amount of product up to 20 pounds. And I've seen a lot of people using these medium boxes too.
Right.
Now, at what point does a company decide, okay, we can't continue to do this anymore. Our orders are too big, or it's just not cost effective. We need a freight forwarder working with us.
It's good to touch base with myself. That question is because, let's say, for instance, depending on how much product you can get in these flat rate boxes, okay, this is a very, very economical way because don't forget it includes pickup. The post office can deliver a box for you, or you can go to the any post office and pick up a free box. And then you can even go to the USPS.com site and put the labels on. Of course, because of international, you have to put what's in it. You have to have a packing list, and certain things need more than just that. You need to have a certificate showing what's ingredients, like this food stuff, and it's going to work commercially. You can't just send cookies. It'll be stopped and commercial like that. So at a certain point, when you have, I would say, if you need to ship 200 pounds, or let's say you have this 4 boxes of that size of a large flat rate box, then you might consider doing that. The difference is, where is it going to be delivered? If your customer is willing to clear customs, things like that. That is a big part. I shipped shipments to Japan where the delivery costs, just pickup and delivery, I mean, the customs clearance and delivery was more than double the air freight cost. Like I mentioned, the air freight is inexpensive, but the inland is all regulated, and especially Japan. I took a bunch of candy shippers to Shanghai, and then I set up a meeting with Japan's customs confectionery division to see how we could. This is before we started to ship to China. I could get the chocolate candies. So when we went there, after I hired an interpreter and spoke to 2 people from Japan, China customs, and they told me, you'd be better off to send it to Hong Kong and have it trucked up. I said, no, we don't want to truck. This is perishable chocolate candy. They said, that's the easiest. I said, when you say it's easiest, it's because they don't check it as much if it's coming from Hong Kong. but it has to be entered Hong Kong. I said, so I told the interpreter, ask him, do you mean for us to smuggle it? And she said, the guy said, yeah, so like smart. I said, we don't want to do anything illegal. And he said, well, you asked for the cheapest way. But then, so we started to ship chocolate candy. And unfortunately, this horror story started. The first shipper shipped 2 air containers of about 90 boxes in each container, one going to Shanghai, one going to Beijing. Now, the orders differ as to what type of chocolate. We should have done it. I mean, now in hindsight, we should have sent it on different days, because when he went on the airlines, he went to Tokyo to transfer one to Shanghai, one to Beijing. They put the wrong container on the different flights. And so it was held, it couldn't clear customs. But Shanghai being almost like an international destination, they ended up sending it to Hong Kong. I mean, the Hong Kong shipment went to Beijing overnight, really fast. And then, of course, the airlines pay for all of this. The one in Beijing, nobody could sign off. It took 1 month, but we had meanwhile replaced the shipment and sent that order for Shanghai directly. After 1 month, they finally got to Shanghai. At about 10 cases are missing out of that. And I'm not saying that they're not very good. It's just, I guess, during the course of leaving it there, of course, the chocolate was really bad because they didn't keep it under, good temperature control. Which is another thing. Some airports, like the Incheon Airport, it takes the drive from the plane side to cargo. It's about 15-minute drive. It's a long range. But then it's not only that. The plane lands, they unload all the cargo, they take the bags off, and the baggage goes to the arrival section of customs. The cargo sits there plane side, and then they wait until they start loading the cargo for the flight after that. So it may take a good 30, 45 minutes before it's even taken to the cargo warehouse. And the cargo warehouse has 5 climatic zones. So you got to put down, it's important to put what temperature you want to be kept at. And we had chocolate candies one. And what happened was it was unacceptable. But this is when they first opened Incheon. So we work with customs there, the cargo company, they bring all the cargo. And they said, you have to alert us by sending a message telling us, one, that you have perishable. They'll send one tug to pick up just that container. So it's not going to be sitting out for more than 15, 20 minutes, and then put down the temperature that you want to keep at. So these are all things that you have to learn. And meanwhile, some carriers here have a problem because their contract with the ramp people, they have to pick up cargo 2 hours prior to the departure. Some planes are not even here. The plane going to Japan is coming in from LA, say, and it sits for, once it comes here, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they take them out too early. So I said, that's not acceptable. So we make sure that it's not taken out right away. And then it's only taken out when the plane is ready to be loaded. And that's why we eliminate some carriers which they don't follow that rule. And we've had some claims. The airlines don't pay claims, just to let you know. But the contract is between the shipper and me. And I have to pay the claim because we didn't do a good job of making sure. So actually, we had to sit on those candy shipments to make sure that it doesn't go out. And even the cut flowers or the potted plants that we're shipping, all those things cannot be left sitting out in hot Honolulu sun. So it's important. So going back to this box, it's very good. Domestically, I had one of the viewers of our program. They shipped pet food, what to call it, pet cookies, doggy cookies. I'm sorry, like doggy cookies. And this company was in Kauai, so she asked me to audit their shipping. They're using the flat rate box. So first off, I asked, is that sufficient to get to your customers? And say, I have 21 pet shops throughout the mainland, and I don't have a big production, so I can only make so much. And these flat rate box. So I compared them, her stuff at rate versus FedEx, UPS, small package service. And I said, for each box, you're saving $10 by going to the post office. And as a matter of fact, FedEx, UPS also provide boxes, but their rate's a little higher, almost $10 for her. So she felt good that, okay, she's doing the right thing. Until such time that her production is increased or orders get bigger to each destination, then she's got to look at other needs. Yeah. We're running over time, but
Okay, I think that's it. I'd like to just say thank you again to Brian and our other speaker who was going to join us from Matson to talk about ocean shipping. However, she had an emergency medical issue, and we'll get her back at another time. If anyone has a question for Brian, here's his contact information. I will be sending out this presentation to all of the attendees as well as
there's a question that was asked on the
oh, do we know when the lane to Japan may
is
open?
opening. This morning's paper will show you that they're expecting a big surge of tourism coming in at the end of April. April 29th, the start of Golden Week, and it's going to be a biggie. So, you know, like I say, we were getting a lot more flights coming in. So that might be the start. But I think Jamie had mentioned to me off camera was that they expect by June to July, maybe July, a huge, you know, influx of Japanese travelers. And the forecast by the Hawaii Tourism saying that next year is going to be a banner year for tourism in Hawaii. So with that, the rates can either come down or, you know, things like that would happen. The more flights you have, the more competitive it gets, the more passengers on the top side pays for the flight coming in. So maybe even the fuel might come down. Who knows?
Great.
But that's it. Yeah.
Okay, with that, then I'd like to wrap this up, and I'll send out this presentation and a link to the edited video within the next week. So with that, let's see. Sorry, one more question. Thanks, Alvin. With that, I'd like to say thank you to Jamie Lund from DBET. Thanks, of course, to Brian Suzuki from Hawaii Air Cargo. And this is Rob Hack from the Hawaii Pacific Exports Council signing off this one, Logistics from Hawaii. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Wow.